Okay, Perek Chav Zayin, chapter 27. There are numerous times that the Rebbe would respond to people who wrote letters about their enthusiasm for holiness that is waning, and the Rebbe would encourage them to learn this chapter. In the previous chapter, at the end, we started talking about how a person should deal with distracting thoughts. And those distracting thoughts are not just thinking about other items that are not relevant to the proper time, but it's also about a sense of despair, where the person starts thinking, look at me, and I can't even concentrate on my davening for more than a few minutes, and I get distracted, and I start to feel like it's hopeless, that I'll never fix this, I'll never get better at it, I'll never improve, I'll never be a good davener, or whatever that means, et cetera, et cetera. So, what should we do? So, in the previous chapter, we talked about that it's the trick from the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is trying to distract you and is trying to uh, redirect your energies into unhealthy, inappropriate thoughts. And when I say inappropriate, I mean it's not the context. And at the very end of the chapter, of chapter 26 of the previous chapter, the Alter Rebbe did touch upon the value of these types of self-analysis, or this characteristic of self-analysis, when you are the initiator. Not that it ambushes you in the middle of your davening and so on, but that a person will benefit from doing what we commonly refer to as a cheshbon hanefesh, self-analysis, where they start looking into their shortcomings and possibly even failures. And they use this as an opportunity to spur them to greater devotion in the service of Hashem. And that's always going to be the indicator of whether or not this is a healthy or unhealthy thing. And we talked about this maybe too much, but I think it's important that there is a certain character within Torah people that actually advocates for this type of, I don't know what the word is, it's almost like glum moroseness that suggests, or that advocates that serious people are morose and sluggish and sad and so on. And it's only shallow people who are happy, happy-go-lucky type of people. And that is an attitude, and and a person could potentially bring a lot of support for that. Because look, let's face it, there are a lot of things that a person could be very sad about, and it comes with a certain air of sophistication, that I am aware of all that's going on in the world, not like those people who are so silly and again shallow. And it clearly, the Alter Rebbe rejects this as a strategy, not just because it's unpleasant to be around, and because it results in a despondence and a despair and a lack of enthusiasm, and because we have the constant demand to be besimcha, that concept of simcha and being besimcha is not only an aspiration, it's an obligation that we have to engage in whatever strategies are available to us, so that we should be besimcha, not just because we like it, but because that is a method through which we serve Hashem. Excuse me 1 second. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe in this parak is going to address a person who is aggravated by these distracting thoughts, and even if they're not just distracting thoughts about how imperfect I am, but even if they're distracting thoughts about being tempted to violate Hashem's will, meaning distracting thoughts of a person starts thinking about whatever indulgence, even if it's a permitted indulgence, but if it's purely for indulgence, or even for sinful thoughts about anger and hatred and vengeance and laziness and et cetera, et cetera. And uh, this occurs to him while he's busy doing his regular stuff, not when he's busy doing obviously godly things. And a person, gets up and he goes to work, and then all he's thinking about is how he could steal this, and how he could cheat there, and how he could be unethical in this way and that way, and it's really bothering him, and he wants to know, what can I do to get rid of them? Or does this mean that I'm just a failure because all I can think about is how I can cheat this person and how I can steal this and so on? This seems to suggest that my Yiddishkeit is a total failure. So how should he deal with it? So here we go, Perek Chav Zayin, chapter 27. And as we often point out when we begin a new chapter, we look at that first letter. It's the letter Vav, which translates as the word and, because this is a continuum of the previous chapter. The last piece of the previous chapter was about the value of a person designating times where they initiate the analysis of their failings, and it's not so bad to feel bad about it. We all know about the jokes about Jewish guilt, but sometimes guilt is appropriate. Maybe the person is guilty. So, I mean, we can mock it and sort of exaggerate it to the point of clowning about it, but there is a value to it, because if a person has done something worthy, they should feel guilty about it, and then, of course, do something about that with that guilt. So here we go. Vima atzvis. Now, if this word atzvis, now again, we talked about this a lot last week, and I'll repeat it again. The word is commonly translated. I don't have a Hebrew English with me at the moment. It's commonly translated as depression, but it's important that we not confuse this with chemical depression. This is not a medical text. So I like the word despondence, where the person is like sort of given up on ever improving. They're just sluggishly wandering around with this glum, black cloud of an attitude. So now it's not just the person is feeling flawed and failed in their Yiddishkeit because of sins that they have already done. That's not the issue that we're talking about. But even that, as we discussed in the previous chapter, we have to be very careful that we initiate that type of self-analysis that could potentially lead to that type of disappointment in ourselves because of our sinful behavior. But here we're talking about not that the person is upset because they did some avera, ella mehirurim royim v'tayvus roish and neifus b'machshavtoi. But rather, they are upset because of, and here the Alter Rebbe uses two words, which we're going to revisit, we've talked about before, hirurim royim. Now, the word hirur is like a stimulus. It's in the process of becoming a thought. It's not yet a thought. It's not a fully developed thought. It's in the process of becoming a thought. It's like the tickle of a thought, which we're going to talk about, and actual taivas, which are manifest in desires and passions, and usually it carries a negative connotation. It doesn't innately, but it usually is associated with something of indulgence. And here it has the adjective that it's taivas rois. It's bad taivas, or taivas for bad things that fall into machshavtoi, his thoughts. So back in chapter 12, where the Alter Rebbe was really nuancing out about the Beinoni and describing the Beinoni, the Alter Rebbe broke down the process of thought development into two steps. So just a very brief reminder. There are three methods through which we can express ourselves: what we think about, what we say, and what we do. Now, speech and action are a little bit more obvious. And speech and action, it is a little bit easier for us to comprehend the rule that there's no such thing as I couldn't help myself. There's no such thing as I couldn't help myself. I had to say that nasty comment, or I had to steal that candy and put it in my pocket. So this is a little easier for us to appreciate and recognize that when it comes to the spoken word and the action, I am absolutely in control of whether I say that or I do that. However, when it comes to thought, here we are breaking it down into two stages. One we're calling hirur, which is like the tickle of the thought, and the other we're calling machshava, which is the actual developed thought. Like the word machshava comes from the word chashuv, to give it significance, to give it substance. And the basic difference between the two is hirur is involuntary and machshava is voluntary. So at a very simplistic example, if I sneak up behind someone, I say boo, and they say, that's involuntary. At a certain point, I go, At a certain point, it becomes voluntary. I don't know what that point is. Is it zero point 0.2 seconds? Is it zero point 0.8 seconds? Is it 1.6 seconds? I don't know. I don't know. That I don't have the answer for you. So Hirurim Royim is the Beinoni has no control over. The Tzaddik, he does. Because to a Tzaddik, the language of indulgence, and certainly prohibited indulgence, it's like a foreign language, meaning if to use a somewhat of an analogy, I don't speak Spanish, but if I hear people speaking Spanish and they speak slowly enough, I might pick up a few words here and there because it's similar enough to English that I might recognize a few words. But if I hear people speaking Korean, I don't speak any Korean. I have absolutely no idea. It doesn't register to me. I don't even hear it because it doesn't register. Well, in a certain sense, this is the analogy that to the tzaddik, prohibition, indulgence is it's Korean. It's a totally foreign language that has nothing to do with anybody. Sorry about that. That doesn't even register. Whereas to the Beinoni, it's like Spanish. It registers. He doesn't indulge in it. He doesn't pursue it, but he does hear it. He hears the sound of that taiva, but he doesn't allow himself to pursue it. But it still bothers him that this falls to him. It bothers him for a number of reasons. First of all, it's bothersome because I'm trying to concentrate on doing what I should be doing, and instead I'm starting to think about how I might cheat this person, how I could get away with it, and so on and so forth. So that's A. And then it bothers him, so to speak, conceptually, because why does this keep coming up to me? Why am I thinking about such things? Why do I even somewhat a little bit recognize the sound of these letters? Why does it somewhat resonate with me at any level that I should hear this idea of again of taiva? So it bothers him in practice and it bothers him in theory as well. And what we're really going to talk about is how it bothers him in theory and how that this should come to him, that this should happen to him, and this is what he is. The Alter Rebbe is going to try and push back against. Now, here the Alter Rebbe. So I'm sorry, two words. Hirur, that's the hirur, the involuntary. Machshava is the voluntary. So this is what's going on with the Beinoni. He's not concerned in this context. He's not concerned about sins that he's done. He's concerned with the stimuli that he's getting for sinful thoughts. He's not developing them, but it bothers him again in practice and it bothers him in theory. So here the Alter Rebbe begins. What should we do about this? So if this came not while he's in the evident service of Hashem, meaning in the previous chapter, we discussed what to do with such feelings of despondence and despair and sadness. Here we're going to talk about how to potentially be preventative from feeling down in the dumps about the fact that I am still struggling with this issue. Here it is. I haven't done this. I've never done this, and I'm working on it, and I'm trying, and I'm still always bothered with it. And this is what's bothering him. Now, if this comes about while he's davening, that is proof positive that this is not coming from a positive place, and he should just immediately and absolutely reject it. It's totally the trick of the Yetzer Hara that's telling the person, why are you even bothering to daven? Don't you know about all the bad things that you did, etc. So that is in the previous chapter. If I'm in the middle of Torah study or davening, and you've heard me say my silly joke before, that if there's something you can't remember you have to do, just start davening or learning. Boom, you will remember. I'm supposed to call my brother. I'm supposed to alphabetize my spice rack, whatever it is that's so pressing that will distract me from my Torah learning. So that we know for sure is to be completely and utterly rejected. Here we're talking about that I'm not in the time of my, quote, obvious avodah. A Jew is always on duty. There's no such thing that I'm not serving Hashem. But the obvious thing that the person is doing is their gashmias. They're at their job. They're doing their gashmias kind of thing. And in the middle of their gashmias kind of thing, they start getting these little signals about lie here, cheat here, steal this, look at that, taste this, do this, etc., etc. Okay. Elabes iskoi, iskov. He's engaged in his engagements. And there's a little bit, perhaps, of a subtle point there, because that word, asek, is like he's really engaged in it. Maybe he's a little too engaged. Maybe that's what he needs to do as one level. The derech eretz, and he's engaged in doing the things that we do here in this world. So again, he's working at his job. He's, I don't know, cooking, shopping, banking, etc., etc. Ukahai gab, anything like that. So now what should his attitude be? So what is the attitude that the person has? And again, as I mentioned, this is a somewhat prevalent attitude in many communities. The attitude is, I'm a failure. This means that I'm not good at it. I should be ashamed, and so on. Because look what a weak person I am, that I can't even do my job without thinking about lying and cheating and stealing from other people. This is a sign of bad stuff. What does the Alter Rebbe offer? He says, no, Adarab, on the contrary. On the contrary, and we've seen this strategy before, not just to dismiss something, but to do the absolute opposite. You may recall that when the Alter Rebbe recommends in the end of, I think it's chapter Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, I'm not good at remembering exactly, that if a person feels the desire to be vengeful towards somebody, he should be extra nice towards them. And we learn from Yosef, who was justified in being vengeful towards his brothers, and not only was he not vengeful, but he was extraordinarily kind to them. So this concept of adarab, of going to the exact 180-degree opposite, is already a strategy that we have employed time and time again. Yesh le'lismeach, he should be happy. Happy? Why am I happy that I'm doing my work, whatever it is, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about lying and cheating? Why should that make me happy? Why? Because even though this fell, and that's the key word, because when things fall, that is usually a sign that it's not a godly thing. We notice this in Torah. We have two words. They sound very similar. It's not here in the Tanya, but I think it illustrates this point. There are two words in Hebrew and in Torah Hebrew. They're homophones, but they are spelled differently. One is kara, kuf resh aleph, to call, to summon, like vayikra. And the other is kara, kuf resh hey, which means to happen upon. Now, again, they sound similar, but the difference is one is about being deliberate, and the other is, oh, by the way. And our general rule of thumb is things that fall or are, oh, by the way, are not holy. Holiness is not, oh, by the way. So when the Alter Rebbe uses this phrase, that the person should be happy, that neuflis, it's fallen on him. What he means by saying it's fallen on him is that this has not come through a strategic process. It has happened upon him, almost like it's a mistake. That's the character that the Alter Rebbe is describing here. Hu masiach daita mehen, and then he pushes it away. So why should this make him happy? Who needs it? Why should this make him happy? So we explain l'kayim mashenemar l'sesur acharei levavchem acharei einechem ashatem zeinim achareihem, because this is a mitzvah that he's done. There is a mitzvah, you may recognize it because it's part of the Shema, that says, do not follow after your heart and after your eyes that you are led astray by. So it's like returning lost items. If I don't find a lost item, I haven't done the mitzvah of returning lost items. That's true. It's not an obligatory mitzvah. It's not like hearing the shofar. I don't have to go out of my way to go looking for lost items to return. But if I come across a lost item, wow, what an opportunity. I get to return this to its owner. This is a great day. I got to do a mitzvah that I don't ordinarily get to do. This is a situational mitzvah. Well, the Beinoni, or the aspiring Beinoni, when he has this distracting thought, he goes, oh, great. Now I get to do this mitzvah. The mitzvah of ignoring the distracting thought. I get to do this mitzvah. It's an opportunity, a situational mitzvah, not an obligatory mitzvah. And I am now getting to do this mitzvah. So he's completely turned the whole situation around. So don't get sad, get glad. I now have the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah. So I might say, yeah, but I don't like this mitzvah. Well, herein lies, again, another core message that the Alter Rebbe always focuses on. It's not about what I like or what I don't like. If when we take the approach that God created the world because God has something that he wants out of this world, which we describe as the Dir B'Tachtonim, and God has come to us and asked us to please participate in his plan to make the world a godly place. So if God drops this lost item in my path, I now have an opportunity to fulfill God's will by returning this lost item to its owner. Similarly, if God drops this thought of lying, cheating, stealing into my field of vision, I now have the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of pushing away the distracting thought to lie, cheat, and steal. So again, it is about, really, it's about my attitude. Now, again, a tzaddik doesn't ever get to do this mitzvah because he doesn't have distracting thoughts. So again, we're not suggesting that he put himself in a situation. We're not going to look for it any more than I have to go out searching for lost items to return to their owners. But if it does come across my path, it's an opportunity for me to do a mitzvah. The mitzvah of returning lost items, the mitzvah of rejecting these thoughts. Now, when the pasuk says to not follow after these thoughts, after our eyes and after our thoughts, to those things that zoinim. Now, the word zoinim, you may recognize it because it is the root word for the word for mizonos, that which satisfies us. It's also the root word for the word zon, like we say in the benching, hazon es oilam, he satiates us. So why is it got such a negative connotation? Because in this context, it has no other value than the indulgence itself. So when it comes to mizonos, we hope to eat in order to serve Hashem. But when it comes to something that is just a simple taiva, so it's got no value in the service of Hashem. It does not in any way enrich my service of Hashem. And therefore, it is appropriately called zoinim, that which distracts, that which pulls away, that which disrupts in that sense. So here, back in the context, the Alter Rebbe is saying that to whom does Hashem entrust this mitzvah of pushing away these dark thoughts? Not the tzaddik, because again, the tzaddik, this is Korean. He doesn't even get such thoughts. No such thoughts fall into his mindset. Now, this reminds me of, again, another similar distinctive attitude and approach that our Rebbe introduced, which is about visiting prisoners. The common attitude is that this guy's in prison, which is very sad. And so, since he's sad, we want to bring him some joy. So we come and we say, hey, we know that you're very sad, but we as a community have not forgotten you. And so we're bringing you matzah, we're bringing you latkes, etc. Then the Rebbe came along and said, well, we have a different attitude. Our attitude is, wherever a person is, it is by hashgacha pratis. And that hashgacha pratis is designed to make sure that that person will bring godliness into that spot. So if Hashem has put this person in such a dark, dark place, that is evidence that he has such a profound light that he can push away this darkness. So we come to this person and we say, we need you to bring light in this dark place. And the fact that you're here is evidence that you can bring light into this dark place in a manner that nobody else can. Nobody else can bring light into this dark place like you can. Well, the same thing here. We're not looking for these distracting thoughts. But if a person is going about their regular stuff, and all of a sudden they find themselves being bombarded by these thoughts about whatever inappropriate behavior, or appropriate behavior but in an inappropriate proportion, they should, instead of saying, "Oh, look what a bad person I am that these thoughts keep popping in my head," we're trying to redirect their attitude to say, "Wow, I have an opportunity now to do a special mitzvah, one that the tzaddik doesn't get the opportunity to do, namely to fulfill Hashem's command to push it away." The person will argue, "No, thank you." Well, again, a little bit. Who asked you? You're in the employ of Hashem. Hashem has orchestrated this, and since Hashem has orchestrated this, clearly it's important to Hashem, important enough to ask you to fulfill this mitzvah, as difficult as it is. Yes, Cardi.
Just a real quick thing. I had an aunt, Halav Shalom, who's passed away, but she used to say to me all the time, remember, because I had, something bad or this or that, all these, thoughts and all this stuff. And she would say, bloom where you are planted. And that's the same
Yes.
idea. Bloom
where you are planted. Well spake. Well said. Absolutely. Absolutely. So here the Alter Rebbe says, Ela b'beinanim. This is about beinanim, and then the Alter Rebbe, ukiyetzabai, and those like them, because that means even if we're not, not us, we're beinanim, but even people who aren't beinanim, that is Russia, they're the ones who get to do this mitzvah. So if they're the ones who get to do this mitzvah, that is a special opportunity. So again, don't get sad, get glad. Instead of saying, "Oh, I'm a failure," because these things still distract me, it's like, "Oh, wow, Hashem has empowered me. Hashem trusts me with this," and doesn't entrust it to the tzaddik at that level. Like Rabbah, who said, "I don't know how I would fare if I left the four walls of the yeshiva and went out into the big, bad, dark world. I don't know how I would fare." That it falls to them. And there is the two phrases. It falls. So again, anything that falls, it's not deliberate. It suggests that it's coming from the Yetzer Hara. All of Madison Avenue is about don't think, just do it. Don't contemplate whether this is within your budget, not within your budget, an appropriate thing, not an appropriate thing. Just do it. Neufel, just jump right in. Don't think about it, right? That's very much a powerful mechanism to evoke taiva and to evoke indulgent behavior. So don't think, just jump right in. That's one. And again, hirur, it's just the tickle. And that's the involuntary. And then it comes up to you. Are you going to let it in or not? You can't stop him from knocking on the door, but you can determine whether or not you're going to open the door. They're going to keep calling. They're going to keep pushing. They're going to keep demanding. They're going to keep asking. They're going to keep pounding on the door. There's nothing you can do, basically, debating, there's nothing you can do to stop him from knocking on the door. What you can control is whether or not you open the door. And if the person opens the door, that's a voluntary act. But he kept banging and banging, right? And he's not going to stop banging. And again, if you think, well, I'm going to ignore him for an hour and then I'm going to let him in, well, then you've conditioned the Yetzer Hara that if you knock for an hour, you'll let him in. He's not going away. He's not making a deal with you and say, well, I'll let you in this time and I won't let you in tomorrow. It's like trying to reason with an animal. And again, we mean that sincerely. You can lecture the raccoon all you want. It's still knocking over the garbage pails. So the Alter Rebbe continues and he says, Bein beheter, even if it is permissible. So again, here we revisit a term that we have discussed previously, that the Beinani is proscribed from inappropriate indulgence in the permissible. So the fact that it's kosher, remember, only means that it's eligible to be used in the service of Hashem. But if a person attacks a kosher behavior with ungodly intent, so then they have further plunged the godliness into klipa. Remember the description of the difference between usher, bound up, imprisoned, and heter, released. Heter is an opportunity. It doesn't mean that it's a virtue. It means it's an opportunity. And if we use the opportunity in the service of Hashem, we elevate the godliness. If we use that opportunity in the service of self, we are further plunging it down into the depths of unholiness. And then what's up to you? What's the mitzvah? The mitzvah, just like there's a mitzvah to pick up the lost item and give it back to the person, excuse me, you dropped your wallet. And just like there's a mitzvah for a person to engage in whatever mitzvah opportunity, blow the shofar, shake the lulav, there's another mitzvah. And that mitzvah is to reject distracting thoughts. So now he's got the opportunity to do the mitzvah. I mean, there is a semi-comical interpretation. Why don't we make a bracha when we give shalach manas? And our answer is, just give it to the guy. He doesn't want you to make your bracha. Why don't we make a bracha when we push away bad thoughts? Just push them away. Don't even hesitate to make the bracha. But it is still the absolute mitzvah. So the person has this distracting thought. Great, here's the mitzvah. Now I get to do a mitzvah. I get to do this mitzvah of returning lost items. I get to do this mitzvah of rejecting distracting thoughts. And he's got to push it away. And then instead of saying, oh, I'm such a bad person that I have these thoughts, he says, great, I got to do a mitzvah. But wait, we'll get to his sort of emotional as well in a moment. Mekayim Lavzeh, he has fulfilled this prohibition, this prohibitory commandment. Unless you think, well, what's the big deal? I just didn't do something. I just didn't. Why is that a big deal? So the Alter Rebbe reassures the person that the Gemara says, Yashav Aveira, that if a person simply sits and doesn't do an Aveira, he doesn't worship idols, he doesn't mix wool and linen, he doesn't mix wheat and grapes, he is granted the reward as if he has done a mitzvah. Now, this ties into a general idea that why is it, or what can we learn from the reality that there are more prohibitive mitzvahs, the loisasehs, 365, than there are obligatory mitzvahs, the mitzvahs aseh, 248, almost 50% more. Why is it that there are so many more? Well, one interpretation is because not doing is a lot more of a godly action than doing. Meaning, an example, kosher is actually a lav, not an aseh. Meaning it's not a mitzvah to eat kosher, it's an aveira to eat non-kosher. What's the difference? Because, of course, an animal will also eat kosher food. If you put kosher food in front of the dog, he'll eat it. What's the difference? The difference is if you put non-kosher food in front of the dog, he'll also eat it. Meaning the capacity to restrain my behavior is the distinctive quality of human beings. We can condition an animal to comply with commands and instructions and so on. But what's harder to do is and impossible for an animal, is to restrain itself. Yes, it makes the cost-benefit analysis that it has been trained that if it chews up the couch, it gets whacked on the snout, so it doesn't do it. But that's not a transformation of the animal. He hasn't restrained his core character. He's just been conditioned. So when a human being, when it has the mind over the heart to resist behavior from this certain perspective, as Zohar says, the Frierdiker Rebbe quotes it, that when we practice, and this is the key word here, iskafia, which comes from the word for a palm or a spoon, the bending, when we bend back our impulse, so the person annoys me, but I don't get annoyed with them. Instead, I show patience with them. Or that food really entices me, but I don't. Like the Gemara says that the scholars would delay their meal an hour just for the sake of not being driven by their hunger. When we restrain ourselves, we are enacting a power of godliness that can't be contained in any particularism. You can't quantify it. The phrase is, it dispatches a godliness that pierces all circumstances and stages of awareness. So here I'm given this opportunity. So the tzaddik, who doesn't even know what cheeseburgers are, it completely does not register within him any more than the idea of, eating turtles or some strange thing that he would never imagine. So he doesn't have the virtue of resisting that taiva. But the Beinoni, who has whatever his taiva is, even if it's a taiva of thought, that wouldn't it be fun for me to humiliate that person or to mock them or whatever it might be, and he rejects it, he now is accessing this aspect of his godly soul in a manner that is in compliance with Hashem. So he is demonstrating this great devotion to the service of Hashem. He is, in fact, complying with this divine characteristic. He should be happy. Oh, now I got to do a mitzvah. There's an old story told about these two brothers, Reb Zusha and his brother, whose name escapes me at the moment, and they got arrested in Tsarist Russia, and they got thrown into jail, and they were very upset. And one of the things that was very upsetting was that they had a chamber pot in the middle of this cell, so they couldn't daven. So the brother was very upset, and his brother says, "What are you upset about? Now the halacha is that we can't daven." She says, "You're right. Now I'm able to do the halacha." So they started dancing, and all the other hooligans who were in the prison, they also started dancing. And the guards come, "What's going on?" He says, "I don't know, something about that pot that's making them happy." So he says, "Oh, I'm taking the pot out," and then he could daven. The point being that when a person comes to the circumstance where they can fulfill a prohibition, they should be happy. So this guy who's all sort of down in the dumps and feeling like that he is a failure because he's still getting these distracting thoughts, our response is, this is an opportunity to do a mitzvah. And when you have an opportunity to do a mitzvah, you should be joyous and happy. Just like when you're doing a mitzvah in action, the resistance should be just as happy. V'adarab, on the contrary, now the Alter Rebbe addresses not just the practical, that is the pragmatic issue about what he should do, and not see this as a sign of failure, but see it as an opportunity to do a mitzvah. But now the Alter Rebbe digs deeper. What is truly bothering this guy is not just that he's got to deal with this distracting thought about lying and cheating. What's really bothering him is that he feels like he's a failure, that I still have this struggle. And this struggle is evidence, he tells himself, that my Yiddishkeit is flawed, is false, that my commitment to Kedusha is weak, and it's a lie, because if I was really a good person, I wouldn't think about such things. Now, the Alter Rebbe here really responds harshly. He says, Adrab, ha'atzvus, this sense of disappointment, that is, not just the nuisance that he has to deal with this, which the Alter Rebbe has now said, stop viewing it as a nuisance and instead view it as an opportunity to do a mitzvah. The deeper, what we would call today in our modern lingo, the psychological issue, that he is all disappointed in himself, and therefore he's disappointed in his Yiddishkeit, this is born of haughtiness, meaning he megasis haruach, it's from an inflated sense of self. Basically, he's saying, how dare, how could this happen to a person like me? Now, in Torah, we have the story of Korach. Korach rebels against Moshe. And what does Moshe do? He thinks, or he comes to Hashem, he says, please don't accept their gift. I didn't take anything from them. I didn't even take one donkey from them. Now we're like, what do you mean? Why is Moshe Rabbeinu sort of even ruminating for a moment about what's going on with this Korach guy? Is Moshe Rabbeinu seriously considering that possibly Korach has some justification to his argument? And the answer is yes. Why? Because that's what true humility is. That's why even when you're a tzaddik, you consider yourself like a Rasha. So this idea that how dare this thought fall into my head is born of arrogance. Why shouldn't it? Why do I think that I should be immune? If Moshe Rabbeinu had Korach, why should I anticipate that I should be completely immune to any sense of distraction, and so on. Quote unquote, as we would say, who do you think you are? Why do you think otherwise? Sheinu makir makoima. He doesn't recognize his status. He doesn't recognize his status. Again, Moshe Rabbeinu had kairach, but nobody would ever question me. Why would I ever think that anybody would question me? Well, why shouldn't they? They question Moshe Rabbeinu. Valkain Yirul. That's why he's sort of feeling badly about it, to use an overly simplistic term. He feels badly because he thinks that he should be immune to this. This disappointment is born of arrogance. Why would this happen to someone like me? Why not? Why do I think that I should somehow be immune? Al she'einu b'madregas tzaddik. He starts thinking, well, I should be immune to this. I'm a tzaddik. And this is that classic trick of the Yetzer Hara. It's the old, the enemy of good is perfect. And since I'm not perfect, therefore I'm giving up the whole thing. If he understood that he's not really immune because he's a Beinoni, he's not a tzaddik, then he would understand why he has these distracting thoughts. Why doesn't the whole world stop and salute me when I walk into the room? Why doesn't everybody realize that I'm right? Why? Well, again, it's born of a sign of arrogance. And again, we know what is the consequence. The consequence is disappointment. And as we have said before, the damage that sadness can produce is potentially more harmful than the sin itself. This sense of despondence and despair, and again, I keep emphasizing it, it's something that may seem strange to us because it's the water we swim in. But this idea of being besimcha, and I don't mean silly and so on, is an emphatic point that Hasidus has brought to the world. Just to share a quick moment, on Purim, I don't know what it's like now, but when I was in Crown Heights, during the Rebbe's lifetime, probably the most boring place to ever be on Purim was Crown Heights. They think, well, this is crazy. I mean, Lubavitch is always known. Every day is Purim. But Purim, the way it's commonly, again, I'm not criticizing, but I'm not criticizing. The way it's commonly perceived that it's about silliness and about a series of puns and nonsense is not simcha. There's sort of a saying which got that Eastern European sarcasm. So if that it doesn't resonate with you, you may not appreciate it. They used to say that Purim is for very serious matters. For silliness, we have Tisha B'Av. Because you know that on Tisha B'Av, we try to minimize, we don't like sitting there weeping and so on. Again, we're not that we are frivolous, but again, it's commonly people are in camp and in summer camp, again, it's a little bit of that sarcastic Eastern European humor. So you take it for what it is and not at face value. So Simcha is not about silliness and nonsense and so on. And again, at Crown Heights, it's not like, and again, in the Rebbe's Farbrengens, Motzi Purim, it's not like people came in their clown costumes. Yes, the kids dressed up, and yes, they did that, and they even came to the Rebbe in their costumes. But it wasn't about silliness. It was about genuine simcha. And the Rebbe would have a Farbrengen start at 9:30 at night after Purim, and you had to be there, with your head on straight and so on, and et cetera, et cetera. So simcha is not about nonsense and silliness and foolishness, etc. Simcha is about it's serious business, as they say. Happiness is serious business. It's not about nonsense and so on. So why is this person despondent? Why is he feeling sad? Because he's a little bit arrogant. He's like, how dare, these thoughts come to me? Well, if he understood that this is what life is like, he wouldn't be so offended by the presence of this negative thought. Okay. What does he think? Does he think he's a tzaddik? Even the tzaddik doesn't think he's a tzaddik. That's what we're told, right? What's the first line of Tanya? Is that quote from the Gemara that even if the whole world tells you you're a tzaddik, even if you are a tzaddik, you never think you're a tzaddik. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu reacts that way. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu reacts to Kairach by pleading with Hashem, please don't accept their gift. What do you mean? Do you have any question? Right, but you're the Moshe Rabbeinu, but Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't think of himself as Moshe Rabbeinu. If he would recognize his level, he is very far. The Alter Rebbe, like really, very far from the level of tzaddik. Now, what is the Alter Rebbe emphasizing? This word ma'oid, it's in the pasuk that all of Tanya is based on. Behold, the matter is very near. What's the difference between being far and very far? The distance between tzaddik and Beinoni is an infinite distance. It's totally Ein Sof. Even the level described about tzaddik in chapters 10 in Tanya is about what we can appreciate about the tzaddik. It's not truly who the tzaddik is. And it's a very hard thing, especially in our Western world, where we don't have a sort of royal class. We think that tzaddik is, a nice guy, a really good guy. He's a little better than me, a lot better than me. But we have no concept of what the tzaddik is. The Alter Rebbe wrote a Sefer Shel Tzaddikim, which was destroyed. It couldn't be published because the world wasn't ready for it. So what the tzaddik is not something that we can understand, let alone really aspire to or even assume that we could be at such a level. And that's the antidote to this despondence. And here the Alter Rebbe gives it away. Here in chapter 27, the Alter Rebbe, I'm saying this facetiously, slips up and gives away the secret. Because look what he says in the next line. V'halavai hayabeinani. And we wish, it's an aspiration that he be a Beinoni. Whoa, 1 second. You said that we have to be Beinoni. You said, right, the Alter Rebbe slips up. I'm saying that facetiously. And he lets us in on a little secret. That even Beinoni is an aspiration. And the Chassidim picked up on this one, and this became a bumper sticker of its own. Halavai Beinoni. Halavai, meaning it's an aspiration. It's not a dismissal, like, oh, I wish I was 10 feet tall. It's an aspiration that we are pursuing. But that's the best we could hope for. And even the Beinoni, if we were to achieve it, also gets distracted thoughts, also gets irritated, also notices taivas and so on. So when the person is walking around feeling like, I am such a failure, here I am, I'm sitting there trying to do my work, and I'm thinking about a way that I could cheat, or I could lie, or I could get away with it. So first of all, the Alter Rebbe says, good for you. Now you get the chance to do the mitzvah of rejecting bad thoughts. Lucky you. I don't get those thoughts. I don't get the chance to reject them. You found a lost item. Good for you. Now you can return it. Good for you. You found an opportunity to do a mitzvah. That's A. And B, what are you so down in the dumps for? What, you think that you're immune? You think that you don't notice these things? You think that you shouldn't, that somehow you're above it all? That's for tzaddikim. And buddy, you ain't a tzaddik. You know why? Because you can't even imagine what a tzaddik is. And even if you are a tzaddik, you don't think you're a tzaddik because the tzaddik still considers himself like a Russia. What are we? Halavai Beinoni. It's an aspiration. That's what we're shooting for. Hey, wait, you told me. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not telling you until chapter 27. Till now, you've been thinking that Beinoni is the expectation. Now we've learned that it's more of an aspiration. V'loi Russia, kol yamav, and not a Russia, because there's no tolerance for that. Afilu sha'achas, even for a moment. And this is even what the Beinoni has to deal with. Meaning, even if we say that you are the Beinoni, and even if you are the Beinoni, remember we described that even a Beinoni can touch the tzaddik level when he has this external stimulus, the itim mizumanim, those special times, like when he's davening and he gets this promotion to where he can't even imagine. Even then, it's not the Beinoni himself. It's only because he's standing on the ladder of the davening or whatever the spiritual elevation point is that's giving him this new perspective where he's untouchable by taiva. But this idea that I expect, it's a very sort of American idea. There's a saying that only Americans expect to be happy. The rest of the world don't have this expectation I should be happy. The pursuit of happiness. In the world, again, maybe it's changed because of America's influence. The idea of happiness is almost dismissed. They're just trying to survive, looking for happiness. And again, probably until maybe the Industrial Revolution, that was it. People wanted to, the farm to produce the food so they would have enough food to put away for winter. They weren't worried about whether they felt fulfilled and meaningful and happiness and so on. Again, we're not against it. But what we're saying is this is sort of an American mentality or Western mentality, like, what do I got to do and you'll leave me alone? How much I got to work and you won't bother me? The whole concept of vacating on vacation. Like, how much money I got to earn so I can go somewhere and just not be bothered. That is not a Kedusha mentality. A Kedusha mentality is not an aspiration to just do nothing and just, sit on the beach and indulge. That is not a sign of, quote, success. In the world, success is measured by how many people serve you. I don't do my own laundry. I got a servant for that. I don't mow my own lawn. I got a servant for that. I don't, I even pay someone to exercise for me. In Kedusha, we measure success by how many people we serve. I'm able to bring this person joy in Torah and mitzvahs and lunch and whatever it might be. It's a completely different mentality, right? The secular world is looking for how much I got to do so I don't have to do anything. And we're looking for how much can I do that I can keep doing. And so often people would come to the Rebbe and say, Rebbe, I built a yeshiva, now build 3 yeshivas. I learned a volume of Talmud, now go learn 2 more volumes. That's not a dismissal. It's on the contrary. Every time you do good, you should be motivated to do gooder. Every time you accomplish, you should be motivated to accomplish more. So this idea of the Bainan, of this person who's all disappointed is because he's got his value system upside down. He's thinking, I got to work hard so I don't have to work any harder. How hard can I do? How much can I work? And then nothing will bother me. And then when I get to nothing will bother me, what am I going to do then? Nothing. That's the problem. Meaning, why do I want to be free of distraction? So I can what? Again, we're talking about eliminating our enemies. And that we're struggling. Like, are we supposed to gloat about eliminating our enemies? Not supposed to gloat. Well, why do we want to eliminate our enemies? So that we can learn Torah and do mitzvahs. That's why we want to eliminate our enemy. So this guy who's like, he's annoyed by these thoughts. We told him, don't be sad, be glad. It's an opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of pushing these thoughts away. That's step 1. Step 2, what are you so disappointed? And this means I'm a failure, quote unquote. Who do you think you are? Maybe you're a Beinani. And if you're a Beinani, which is pretty impressive, you're still going to have to deal with these thoughts. It's only the tzaddik who does it. And you ain't a tzaddik. And what is a tzaddik? It's not even something to consider. It's not even something you should anticipate. When am I going to get to the point where I have to do anything else? Years ago, I overheard 2 people talking. I was young, and it made an impression upon me. This guy said, I know this guy. He sold his company for $20 million. That used to be a lot of money. And now he plays golf all day. So another man who was sitting there, who was an older guy, a little more wisdom, he said, this guy was a young guy. He was like, oh, wow, what a cool. He says, he should have sold his company for $30 million. He could have hired someone to play golf for him all day. And it made a big impression on me. I was like 15. Made a big impression upon me because what he was saying is, what kind of life? That's an aspiration. That's what I did. So I just play golf all day. That's not what we're here for. We're not here to play golf all day. I'm not against it, but we're not here to play golf all day. So why is he so proud he plays golf? Be even prouder. Don't even play golf. Just hire someone to play golf. Just sit on the couch and do nothing. What a deal, right? What a sweetheart circumstance. Okay. So the Alter Rebbe continues. That what is the role of the Beinani? That when, remember we described, the taiva begins in the heart and it takes the up elevator because it wants the brain to pursue it. What do you want more than anything else in the world? Now go out there and do it, right? That's upside down. That means follow your heart and get your brain involved. So my brain says, well, this is a stupid thing. But then the heart comes up with different tricks and justifications and minimizations, and everybody does it. Again, unless the guy's a psychopath, nobody thinks they're doing anything bad. They explain, no, but in my case and in this circumstance and in that way, and if I do it this way and that way, and then it's going to be good. So what's the role of the Beinani? to put up a stopple and say, no, I'm not letting you drive around the barricade so you can go on the highway in the snowstorm and get stuck in the middle of Indiana. No, I'm not letting you do that. No, I am not letting you do that. That's the role of the Beinoni. That's not a sign of failure. That's a sign of success. The success is that you have rejected the stimulus that comes from the heart and tries to penetrate the brain. And every time you do it, because it's really annoying, but you should know, you are succeeding. You are fulfilling the mitzvah of iskafia, pushing down. And when you do that, Hashem responds in kind. Hashem is matching our energy. And every time we fulfill this, every time we push away our impulse in the service of Hashem, Hashem responds in kind, like the superiority of not violating, even more so than complying. Because a compliance is going to match my ability. How much did I hear the shofar? How much did I shake the lulav? How much intensity did I have when I ate the matzah? Versus, I didn't think about punching the guy in the nose. That's an absolute. That's unbounded. And therefore, it penetrates all stages of awareness and actually lifts me up. That's the unique gift of Hashem. That's the virtue of Iskafia, and why we are actually glad that Taiva exists, so that it gives us the opportunity to push away. And again, I don't know anything about engineering, but that's how planes fly, with resistance and swimming and all of these circumstances that we talk about. And every repeated application builds that muscle. I mean, I did it once. Why do I still have to do it? Well, that's how life is. We have to train ourselves because our humanity is naturally inclined to indulgence. To get ourselves above indulgence requires repeated application of that same strategy. Again, just like we have in Pirkei Avos, where we have our great sages, he used to say it all the time. I said it once, why don't you remember? Well, because we have to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, the muscle memory and so on, to overcome our natural inclination to be self-indulgent. So the author of it continues that when it rises up like the eagle, meaning it's going to get stronger in response to our rejection, it's coming back, we get to bring it down. And that is the fulfillment of a mitzvah. And that is cause for joy. Pashas Truma. Daf Kuf Chavches, Begoydel Nachas Ruach Lefanav Yisparach Chadas Kaf Sitrachal Lesata. The Stal Gekar the Good Shabricha Leela Al Kula Yeser Mishivcha Achra Vistalkus Da Yeser Bikula. That when we resist temptation, this is the greatest affirmation of our commitment to the infinity of Hashem. The resistance to temptation is the greatest gift that we give to Hashem, more than eating matzah. And I'll give you an example that's actually directly relevant to women. Why are women obligated to eat matzah? Seemingly, it's a mitzvah's aseh shazman gram. It's a time-oriented mitzvah. They're not obligated to sit in the sukkah. Yes, of course, they're allowed to, and they can say the bracha, but they're not obligated. They're not obligated to shake the lulav. Why are they obligated, or how do we know that women are obligated in the mitzvah of eating matzah on the nights of Pesach? That's for us, Eliana. We have 2 nights of Pesach. I don't know if you're familiar. You may have heard. We needed two times. Why? Because they are enjoined in the prohibition against chametz. And we learn that anybody who's prohibited from eating chametz is obligated to eat matzah. So what we see is that the compliance of the loisaseh, the compliance with the thou shalt nots, as we talked about, is in this manner a superior form of affirmation of the infinity of Hashem. Because again, will a dog eat matzah? Yes. But will the dog not eat chametz on Pesach? He'll do it. So when we resist the temptation, we are creating, in that sense, a superior nachas for Hashem. And therefore, when we get the opportunity to do it, instead of being disappointed or annoyed, we should be celebratory. And if we think, but why has this happened to me? Well, why not? Why do you think that you should somehow be immune to such distraction? Moshe Rabbeinu had kairach You think I'm going to skate through. That's not our objective. It's not an objective in life to skate through. Well, I don't have to do nothing. I got somebody to play golf for me. I don't have to do anything. That is not a Kedusha value. It's not a Kedusha value to do nothing. The Kedusha value is to resist the temptation of violation. All right, we'll stop here. To be continued.